combat. Does not take very long for Chad to completely lock up the game.
Looks like both these players are not happy with what they've seen as far as deck lists are concerned. Again, our other matchups and other decks that are in the top 8. We have 1 versus 8, Corey Baumeister against Zan Saeed. That'll be our backup match if we have time to jump that way. Corey playing Green White Devotion, Zan playing Naya mid-range. We've got Brian Lee, number 3 overall seed, playing Mono Red against Daniel Cassetti, playing Green White Aggro. And then Ralph Patesh, number 7 overall seed, playing against Ryan Krasinski, who's playing Mono Red. So 2 Mono Reds, 2 Green White Devotions, 2 Abzan Aggros, an Abzan Whip, and a Naya mid-range.
But Boswell, definitely the story of day 2 at least, came in undefeated, was the second to last player to take their first loss, and that was the only loss he took.
One could argue the story of day 1, even though we didn't see him very much. He's undefeated. And 2 of our players who were undefeated this weekend, Boswell and Krasinski, after day 1, they made the top 8. That's tough to do because you put a lot of pressure on yourself then.
Yeah, and even though, 9-0 is a great start, you're still looking at a 4-2 performance that's required to make the top 8. So even those really, really good starts don't guarantee anything. And then Royce Walter, our last undefeated player, who gave Boswell his first loss, not in the top 8.
Yeah. And he was certainly a story during the course of this turn. We see Boswell's going to keep his opening hand. We'll see if Kastel will do the same.
Our teamer Aggro pilot, X1 with 2 rounds to go, also not in the top 8.
Magic can be a tough game sometimes. Oh boy. He's going to show off the hand before sending it back. Little Kastel.
Very good friend of ours, wants to play for the camera a little bit.
Therefore, I will call that what I wanted to say, which is that's an amateur's move.
Yeah.
Look, buddy, nobody cares. Just mulligan your hand.
Right.
Also, we can't even see it.
Right. You couldn't even show it to the camera.
No. So just take your mulligan. Chad will go back and watch this. He'll realize that we are making fun of him. There's nothing he can do.
Right. It's all... Now it lives in immortality. This conversation that we're having right now at his expense will outlive the 3 of us.
That's correct.
It's eternal.
Chad, also, thanks for dinner yesterday. Appreciate you.
Yep.
Really nice of you.
It was really nice.
It was.
But mulliganing in this matchup, not really the end of the world for Chad, because he's trying to essentially trump what Andrew's up to. It's not so much about 1-for-1 trades, even though there's Thoughtseize and Heroes Downfalls. It's getting his shop set up and overpowering Boswell to the extent that there's not really draws in Andrew's deck that matter.
Whip of Erebos, Siege Rhino among the options here. Kastel giving it a long look over. There's at least 1 land there in Sandstorm Citadel. Looks like he has a Courser perhaps too.
Of Erebos. It looks like a bit of a clunker, and I believe there is only 1 land in that hand.
You do draw a card every turn, as they say. He'll start with the Sandstorm Citadel. He's going to risk it. And we are underway here in the quarterfinals of Grand Prix Miami. You saw Boswell start off with the Windswept Teeth. We'll see what a second land will be.
And the first draw for Chad, Land of War Wastes.
Manic Influence. And now Fleece Main Line. So Boswell does have a 2-mana play. Of course, he does play Fleece Main Line and Rakshasa Death Dealer. So not too surprising to see him have one. He'll search up a Plains there with the Windswept Teeth. Joined with the Manic Influence will allow him to play the 3/3 for 2 mana.
Chad, when not battling in Magic tournaments, is a day trader and tennis instructor, and Andrew Boswell, as we all know, is a potter. The game takes all kinds.
It really does. Here's a Seder Wayfinder. An Urborg. An Evolving Wilds. A Windswept Teeth and a Sylvan Caryatid.
Doesn't look like much of a mulligan now.
Easy keep. Draw a card every turn. One of them's got to be a land, right? Isn't that how it works?
It's one of those likely so much of my hand is spells that
it's one of those implied keeps that we like to talk about. It's basically keeping a 9-card hand.
Right, because you have 2 draw steps. You've already mulliganed. So how do you mulligan 9 cards at that point?
The Seder Wayfinder is guaranteed to find land, so that's a 10-card hand.
Right.
So I don't know what he's thinking about.
The cards in your graveyard further discount your delve spells.
Yeah.
So that unlocks a card in your hand that would have otherwise been dead.
So that's 11?
Now we're up to 11.
Oof. Chad giving this a long thought on which land to take. Windswept Teeth is a card that he can take and then sacrifice into another card in his graveyard for Delve spells, or he can go with an Urborg and really fix his black mana completely. And it looks like he selected the Urborg. Evolving Wilds was never in the question.
There's also just an issue of, total points of damage too. 1 damage is not a huge deal, probably doesn't influence Chad's decision very much, but the more that he can preserve his life total, the better. So all other things being equal, the Urborg, a slightly more attractive card.
This main line going to come across. And Boswell going to play Abramaz. King Rescos has to take 1 to do so. Now Kastel immediately under the gun.
But as we know, he kept a hand stocked with spells, and Vermaz is a bit on the slow side.
Hero's Downfall will take care of Vermaz. Satyr Wayfinder going to come to the red zone. Means it has no interest in blocking, and we will go back Boswell's way. Boswell will untap those 4 permanents, and he'll take a draw step.
And even though Chad's the control deck in this matchup, don't discount these points of damage. Boswell deals a lot of damage to himself, and Chad has Siege Rhino, which triggers, and he has Whip of Erebos, which brings things back with haste. So little points of damage here and there can add up.
Fleece main line going to come in, cast that down to 14. Doesn't look like Boswell has land number 4, but he does have Warden of the First Tree number 1, along with Boon Satyr number 1.
And to get an idea how color sensitive this deck is, right now, Boswell fetched a Plains with his Windswept Heath here, so he could cast Fleece Main Line. Could have gotten a Forest or a Plains, works either way. And now, with Death Dealer and Warden of the First Tree in his hand, he can't cast both this turn, even with Mana Confluence in play. I mean, this deck is really taxed on its colored mana.
There is the Warden of the First Tree, with 2 mana available to activate it. So we head back Kastel's way. Three mana. Maybe time for a Courser? Yeah. Take a look at the top card, Hornet Queen. If we ever get to that point, it'll be hard for Boswell to win.
Yeah, that's one of those. Boswell has played this deck in the past with something like Bioblade in it. Now that locks up the ground basically forever. Yeah. He can go all the way to the top rope with Warden. That's a plan to get around it, and Siege Rhino triggers. But we're not talking about a lot of outs.
Boswell did draw a land for the turn. You can see his hand. Tassiger, Hero's Downfall, Boon Satyr, Rashasha Death Dealer, and the freshly minted Mana Confluence. Chad just trying to slow things down, keep his life total high. You saw a land come into play, trigger the Courser, Hornet Queen on top of the deck. That's where he's trying to get to. That 7 mana threat, if he can get there, life is great. But he's got to get there. And Boswell's goal is to never let him do that. Here are the attacks. Now Chad's got a lot to think about as far as blocking is concerned. But it looks like Courser's going to jump in front of Fleece Main Line. Or perhaps the Warden. He wants to get a better look. Probably hasn't played against this one too much today. Boswell, a huge fan of this card. Many are not.
I'm a little surprised to see Chad not offer up a double block here. The worst case scenario is that he uses a removal spell on your Courser, and then you're down your Wayfinder. I suppose the risk of Abzan Charm is very high in that spot on the double block.
So the reason I see him not double blocking here is, okay, I can single block, and then my creature's going to live. And yes, you get to deploy something else post-combat. That's absolutely true. But if I double block, it encourages you to want to kill the Courser with a removal spell. And at that point, Chad might be thinking, if I just single block, I get to keep my Courser, unless he has the one Abzan Charm in his deck, and I'd rather have my Courser because I need more lands to get to Hornet Queen.
Sure. I guess if Hornet Queen's the top card, he can't really risk it, or at least it's very dangerous.
Tassiger on top now. That land will bring Kastel up to 12 so long as he does remember his trigger, which he does.
That just feels like one of those spots where it's pretty juicy for Boswell to attack even if he has nothing, because it on the surface looks like a risky double block. And even if Boswell has a trick there, it's not necessarily the end of the world. But I suppose Abzan Charm is very bad. He has it. Now it's a 5/5 against your no removal and you're down your board. So that's enough of an incentive.
To be fair, we have seen Boswell make that attack with nothing this weekend.
Yeah. It's a spot where it's hard for Chad to call, but that makes me feel like the flip side of that is, well, if your opponent gets to make that attack every single time, you're giving up percentage points over time by never making the block. I don't know. It's one of those weird sort of game theory spots.
Yeah. That's what makes Magic great. Valor stance the draw. So Boswell's got a lot to consider now. Siege Rhino came down for Kastel. He's up to 15. Boswell's down to 12. We talked about how Boswell deals himself a lot of points of damage. 2 mana confluence. Well, that'll certainly add up. There's Rashasha Death Dealer. Boswell will have to pay 1 to cast it. And it's time to pass that turn back over to Kastel. Tasker the draw, top card of the deck. As Boswell may stop him in the draw step here for Valor stance. We'll see. It's a swamp.
Yeah, with Boswell knowing about the Hornet Queen, there is an argument for getting rid of Corsair here. It looks like Boswell trying to take it a slightly more aggressive stance. Looks committed to killing the Siege Rhino, making a big attack next turn.
Sandstorm Citadel, the land on top of the deck here for Kastel. He was able to put his swamp into play, so he's got 6 mana. He's 1 away from Hornet Queen. You do a green check. He's got triple green out there, so that won't be a problem. Here's Tassiger on the cheap with the ability to activate.
It's Whip of Erebos there.
This is getting ugly for the Boz. Kastel's last 2 cards, an untapped land and a Hornet Queen.
And at this stage, Whip of Erebos, 4 mana, my team has lifelink, is a fine card for Chad to cast. And the long-term implications of this card, they're really bad for Boswell's side of the table.
Valor stance going to take care of Tassiger. Boswell draws a copy of Sandstorm Citadel. A 5th land, but not one that enters the battlefield untapped. Boswell considering playing the land. Going to slow up a little bit, but he's also given away that he has one now. Hero's Downfall will clear out the Rhino. This means that Boswell will have some attacks to make here. Death Dealer will hold back, the rest will come in.
And I really like offering up a double block now.
Now I want to. Again, Kastel has access to the deck list, so he doesn't have to worry about a card like Murderous Cut.
Yeah.
There aren't even enough cards in the graveyard to do that. So he can double block something, gain 3 life, negate the damage that one of the 3 power creatures would deal, and be perfectly fine. Now, it looks like there's going to be some chump blocking that does take place here. I'm a little bit surprised by that.
It feels like Whip of Erebos, with the Whip of Erebos in play, you can afford to, basically what the card's instructing you to do is make some trades to make inroads in your opponent's board and then win with the leftovers. So I think in that spot I would have preferred to see just both go in front of, I guess, Warden probably, as it's the bigger long-term issue.
Because I don't think that Policeman line is going to be much of an issue. Once the shop gets set up,
right,
I don't think it's going to be much of an issue. The Warden, because of Trample,
could become an issue.
Could
become an issue. And you don't have to worry too much about taking the 7 damage that turn because you're getting 3 of it on the way back from the whip. So it's really only 4.
It's Hornet Queen time. And that means there will be some tokens joining it.
That said, this is still a pretty commanding position for Chad.
Well, you mentioned it. Boswell's deck list at times has played Bile Blight. This is not one of those times.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a real disaster if he kills the Hornet Queen because of Whip of Erebos.
Andrew basically can't do it, and I don't believe game 1 he can get the card Whip of Erebos off the table.
Yep.
So the only attack that Boswell can really make now is an attack for lethal. He can't go halfway because the Hornet Queen going to the graveyard is too bad for him.
Kastel does get in with the Courser. Death Dealer unable to block in that situation. I suppose it could chump, but it's unlikely it would do so. So it did not. Boswell at 9, Kastel at 18. And Kastel is certainly in the driver's seat right now. Whip of Erebos and Hornet Queen in play along with Courser.
Now, a swing card for Boswell in this matchup, and something we haven't mentioned yet, the card he just drew is Anafensa. If Anafensa comes into play preemptively, it shuts down a lot of this Whip of Erebos shenanigans. Also, he can play it now and at least prevent the Hornet Queen from being engaged in combat, but the Hornets themselves are still very hard for him to attack through right now. So Anafenza as a turn 3 play, quite potent. Once we get to this stage, it's not quite as good. And yeah, I think he's just tapping.
Yep. I mean, he knows that he can't get out from underneath the situation. Yep. It's too much to overcome, especially Corsair's not going to die, so it's going to continue to provide advantage. Anafenza's late to the party, and he can't get by Hornet Queen. And it's something coming into this tournament that most people, you know, the metagame has obviously gone through shifts. We have seen this sort of strategy work before, but it's been away for a little while. Kastel has it again this weekend, and it's very potent in this matchup.
We saw this deck kind of come up as a response to Abzan midrange right after Pro Tour Concertarch here, because there was a time where Hornet Queen was just, pardon my pun, the bee's knees in the Abzan mirror match. Best thing going on, not an easy card to answer. Eventually the metagame cycled, and Hornet Queen was not as good as it once was. But in these kind of matches where there's no Bioblight and people are just trying to attack on the ground, it's still awesome. And as a result, Chad, even though he had some stumbles, takes game 1.
Well, it's time to take a look at the sideboards here. So we will see exactly what Boswell and Kastel do have. And we will start with Boswell as he's on the play. We've got 4 Thoughtseizes, 3 Nissas, 3 Drowning Sorrows, 2 Glare of Heresies, 2 Back Nature, and a single Murderous Cut.
So we've seen Boswell bring in the Thoughtseizes and Nissas pretty consistently whenever he's been in some sort of control matchup. I expect that to happen here as well. I think the one Murderous Cut is fine. It's just an additional answer to Sea Trinos, and I think he needs to bring in something to answer Whip of Erebos. Back to Nature is a little bit on the narrow side. He may want it here. It also answers Corsair Crewfix. The flip side is he can just try to bank on being aggressive with an aggressive curve with Anafenza and ending the game before Whip of Erebos comes online, or making it too slow for Chad to activate, but it's possibly wants some answer there.
Other side of things, 3 Master of the Unseen, 1 Thoughtseize, 1 Reclamation Sage, 3 Read the Bones, 3 Drowning Sorrow, 2 Glare of Heresy, and I think a big one here, 2 copies of Crux of Fate.
Crux of Fate and Glare of Heresy are going to be excellent for Chad in this matchup, and it helps him, you know, kind of just hunker down, play the card advantage and card quality game, which he's very well suited to play. I think you could see Read the Bones coming as well if he thinks that Andrew is also slowing down his deck and trying to convert into more of a mid-range strategy.
Read the Bones seems a little risky.
It is. If Boswell is focused on curving out, it's not very good. But if he's slowing his deck down to try to go into these Thoughtseizes and Nissas, it becomes a lot more attractive.
I can certainly see that. You know, if you predict that your opponent is going to slow down, then you can slow down with them and Read the Bones and get that advantage. But if you think he's going to speed up, or maybe try to go the same speed as he was, especially when he's on the play for game number 2, doesn't really want to try to play a longer game because he can't overcome a card like Hornet Queen, perhaps Read the Bones stay home. Exactly.
It's one of those things where if Boswell presented his same 60 and you knew that, I would not go near Read the Bones. I don't think it's that kind of matchup. But when you're playing against the sideboarded plan that Boswell has here, I think they become a little bit more attractive.
And, you know, truthfully, I would be interested in Read the Bones if I'm Chad, maybe if I'm on the play.
Yeah, that could be a swing card from player draw also. Like I said, I don't know what I would personally do even in the seat. I don't know what Chad's going to do. It's a card where if it came in, I would not be surprised, and if it's in the sideboard, I would also not be surprised. The Glare of Heresies and the Crux of Fates, though, those are going to be great here, and those are definitely coming in.
This match will resume here once these players have figured out exactly how they do on a sideboard, as they're taking a look at each other's deck list so they can be as informed as possible. Again, Corey Baumeister, number 1 overall seed, Brad Nelson's brother, with green-white devotion, is playing against Zan Saeed, playing Naya mid-range. That's our 1 versus 8. That's also our backup match, so if we have time to jump that way, we certainly will. What a story for Corey.
Yeah, incredible. Being convinced to come out here by his brother, Brad, struggling in the trials a little bit, playing with no buys, went largely undefeated through the tournament, just took draws because that green/white devotion deck can be very, very slow. But now in the top 8, qualified for the Pro Tour, will be playing with his brother.
Then we have Brian Lee, number 3 overall seed, playing mono red against Daniel Cachetti, who is playing green-white devotion. Interesting matchup there. Lee being number 3 overall seed, having the play there. It's got to be pretty nice.
Yes, I think that's a big deal in that matchup. Nice story for Daniel, too, a friend of mine who I didn't even know was making a deep run this tournament. We had so many people to cover that some people kind of fell by the wayside. But he's someone who's worked some shows back when I was over at Stoneblade Entertainment. He worked, you know, PAX East and Gen Con on behalf of the company. Cool dude, one of the Madison players. Looks like he's basically got Sam's list. So
no surprise there. And then last but certainly not least, Ryan Grodzinski, a player who was 9-0 coming in to day number 2. One of our 4 undefeateds with mono red. He had to win his last match to make it into the top 8. He did. He beat Teamer Aggro. He's number 2 overall seed. Now playing against Raul Patesh, who is playing Abzan Aggro as well. Patesh and Boswell are 2 Abzan Aggro players. Different lists, same idea. Mono red matchup seems tougher, actually, both of them.
I would want to be on the mono red side of the matchup. I don't think it's unwinnable for the Abzan Aggro side by any stretch, but I think the lands are just too much. I think if both decks had access to unlimited pain-free City brasses, the Abzan Aggro deck would just be much better. Pound for pound, it's a better deck. But the lands that comes into play, tap lands, all the mana confluences, it plays right into mono red's hands.
It does hurt. 2 mono red decks making the top 8 here this weekend. 2 Abzan Aggro decks, 2 green white devotion, a Naya mid-range, and an Abzan Whip deck here from Chad Kastel as he does win game number 1 against Andrew Boswell. See both players deep in the tank on the sideboarding here. Siege Rhino decks, very prevalent here on day number 2 of competition, and we've got 3 of them into the top 8.
And a cursory glance of social media would suggest that there's nothing that galvanizes the player base, both for and against, as extremely as player playing mono red aggro with mismatched basic lands. That's just going to get, some people are going to be in that guy's corner, and some people are really going to be rooting for that guy to lose. That's how that one goes.
Where would you say you stand?
All right, so Chad just flashed the sideboard for us.
Oh,
It looks
here we
like he's
go.
leaving Read the Bones in the board.
Okay, fair enough. Where do we stand on these basics with mono red?
There is a point where it's so bad it's good. It comes full circle.
Okay.
Mismatched basics are actually, they're kind of endearing in a way.
Now, of course, I know that you do have the beautiful mountains that you play with.
Yeah.
Arabian Nights, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. You own like 20 of those?
More.
Do you,
I don't know exactly.
Do you
know
need
the
more
count.
than 20? Or is it
I
just kind of
played-
a labor of love?
I played in the PTQ once during Lorwyn block where my deck had 24, and that was the number that I decided
That's
that I
a
needed.
lot of those.
Yeah, the deck was really bad.
Okay. Any 24 mountain deck doesn't sound very good.
No, it's not good. It was Figure of Destiny and then just a whole heap of crappy cards.
well,
and a
you
bunch
had,
of mountains.
You had one good card,
Well, there's one good card.
so that's nice. At least you had one good play.
I believe it was targeted by Nameless Inversion, and then every other spell I had played for the rest of the game was countered or immediately killed. That's what I recall.
So a fairies matchup, probably.
Or 5-color or some other, the Tree Folk deck. I don't know. It's all the same thing. All my stuff died.
Doran, you probably couldn't beat that card. That's probably pretty big. Difficult to beat for a red strategy.
It's pretty tough, yeah.
It's very important for me that my lands match.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that are very compulsive about it because I'm worried, my opponent thought seizes me and then I draw a land the next turn. I can't remember which land they saw, and then they get this piece of information, and now all of a sudden I lose this game as a result of it. Well,
Unless I'm on full-blown tilt and I just don't care. It's one or the other. Either it's, when I'm playing a structured tournament, it's very important that they all match, or I'm playing like a booster draft in a tournament, who even cares?
Sure.
And my deck sucks. My lands are going to be mismatched. I don't even care anymore.
There's some times where I've done it just to be liberating, just to remind myself that this doesn't really matter.
As you mentioned, people on social media, they are very particular about this. Brian Kibler, I think of
In terms of what?
mismatched lands.
Yeah.
It's a very
He has
important thing to him.
He's got some stylistic choices.
He does. Ralph Patesh, Ryan Grodzinski. That's Abzan Aggro against Mono Red Aggro. They're going to game number 3 right now. That's our 2-7 matchup. Boswell going to take a look at his hand. He's going to send it back very quickly. Did not like what he saw.
Yeah, it was a no-lander by the appearance.
That's another one of those implied keeps. If you have no lands in your hand,
Hands all gas.
you're probably going to just draw all lands.
Right.
Right?
The most likely draw step is a land, and your hand's loaded with action. Using this logic, you will never mulligan a hand for the rest of your life.
That's correct.
And if you don't like mulliganing, all you need to do is buy into this way of thinking. Imply 10-card hands. Top card has to be a land. Opponent's playing with Thoughtseize, can't mulligan then.
That's true.
They trade 1 for 1, that's
Yeah.
really bad.
We got all our bases covered.
Yeah.
If you want to keep a bad hand, just keep listening to what we say.
Right.
Daniel Cachetti does win game number 1 of his match against Brian Lee, stabilizing at 1 life. So he is currently up a game. Boswell taking a look at his 6. That's a 1-lander.
I think this is another stinker.
It's one of those, no, not even an implied hand there.
Only land is basic plains. Hand contains Nissa, so already kind of a mulligan, and then a bunch of 3-color spells.
So a tough time for mulligans here for Boswell as Kastel's waiting patiently with his opening hand. And Boswell, we saw him make the top 8 at Grand Prix Boston Worcester last year. A modern Grand Prix. He was playing Jund, lost in the finals to an Abzan strategy. Lingering Soul is a very popular card at that tournament. Boswell with his Jund deck that had Olivia Valderin in it made a deep run in that tournament.
The Sugarloaf New York crew way ahead on the tech when it comes to modern Jund.
Oh, yeah.
Reed's list always has some spice. Chandra Pyromaster was immediately adopted right when that thing came out.
They've got it all figured out, man. Time to look at 5. This one has 1 land too.
Sansep Citadel, though, so at least any land off the top will unlock the hand. I can't imagine going to 4 here. I know the Nissa looks like a mulligan too, but Sansep Citadel, I think, is gives you enough play if you draw a land that it's worth keeping.
I think he's already got to get pretty fortunate, so he should keep this one instead of mulliganing to 4. He will keep. There is a Citadel. Kastel with the Temple of Malady. Top card goes to the bottom. Heading Boswell's way. He'll take a draw step. Rakshasa Death Dealer is not a land. Back to Kastel. Latimer wastes. He'll pass the turn back. Boswell will draw. That is a land. Sansep Citadel. Pass the turn back. It's a forest. That's a courser. We'll take a look at the top card here. Satyr Wayfinder. And we'll be heading Boswell's way in just a moment. Boswell will draw a Warden of the First Tree. So you mentioned his hand is unlocked. He's got quite a few options.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, Chad's making his land drop and just getting to his good stuff.
And there is the problem card in Hornet Queen. Satyr Wayfinder the draw here for Kastel. It'll be interesting to see if he wants to cast it and turn over Hornet Queen into the graveyard.
Also worth noting, Chad currently without white mana.
Yep. Quick update for you on our 1 versus 8. Corey Baumeister does win game number 1 here against Zan Saeed. Green-white devotion. Up a game over Naya midrange. You mentioned the lack of white mana and the refusal to cast Satyr Wayfinder.
It means he must really want to draw that Hornet Queen.
Well, we saw what it did game 1.
And it's not like Boswell gets that much better against a post board unless he brought in something like Drown in Sorrow, which is a long ball.
And there's a land there for Boswell. There's a Warden. This is a Fleecemane Lion. Pass the turn back. Kastel will draw the Hornet Queen. We'll see the next card's a copy of Tassiger. Maybe more willing to mill that one with Satyr Wayfinder. It also looks like Kastel does have white mana in a Windswept Teeth he's been sandbagging.
He's got a couple different options here. He can play kind of the removal game here and glare something and downfall something. He can also just go for a full reset right now with Crux of Fate and use the removal spells to buy the time to get to Hornet Queen. A lot of different ways to play this.
Crux of Fate seems like it's mighty attractive here, especially when your opponent's mulligan to 5. One thing he can do here as well is if he has interest in drawing the Tassiger, he can actually use the Windswept Teeth to tap for black mana, thanks to Urborg being in play, and actually cast his Crux of Fate. A lot of options here for Kastel. And he will play Crux of Fate. So he will reset things. Tassiger will return face down. That'll be the draw next turn. And we're going to go back Boswell's way. The Bos will draw. Copy of Temple of Silence. He'll play that. It's time to scry. We'll see where the top card's going to go. As you can see, his hand of Fleecemane Lion, Hero's Downfall, and Nissa Worldwaker.
Yeah, it's a really good position here for Chad to play, you know, draw step to draw step with Boswell and just allow his more powerful individual cards and the threat of Hornet Queen to carry the day.
There is Fleecemane Lion. Tassiger the draw here, of course, for Kastel.
And this sets up a potentially very nice turn of something like a Satyr Wayfinder, Glare, and Tassiger could all be cast at the same turn.
I've seen worse turns. He'll start by sacrificing Windswept Teeth. There's the Plains. Looks like I may see the glare here. Sequencing pretty important here, so we can do everything in one turn. Here's the Wayfinder. Tassiger, Citadel, Crux, Rhino. Here is Tassiger. He'll remove quite a few cards here thanks to the delve. Make sure that his Tassiger activations will be good ones. He'll be left with a Tassiger and a Siege Rhino. Assuming that's the way that he wants to delve things away.
Yeah, I mean, everything in the graveyard is reasonable. There's no obvious choices there to get to exile. I think that I would prefer to exile the Tassiger and maybe keep Glare, but it's pretty close.
Kastel will play a land, and now he'll pass the turn back, so a perfect turn there. Uses all of his mana. We head back Boswell's way. Hero's Downfall. We'll take care of Tassiger. Boswell's hand right now, 2 copies of Nissa. Kastel will untap and draw. Commune with the gods. An attack for 1 here with the Wayfinder. We'll bring Boswell down to 16. Now here is a Commune. So take a look at the top couple of cards. A Swamp, a Llanowar Waste, a Hero's Downfall, a Sylvan Caryatid, and a Commune. Caryatid will go to the grip, the rest will go to the bin. Now it's time for a Rhino. Trigger here will bring Kastel up to 22. Boswell will go down to 13. And you can just see how the games are playing out. Of course, Boswell did bully in the 5 here, but you can see how tough it is.
Yeah, it's just Crux of Fate especially now, that the post-board. I think Andrew's best game plan involves just flooding the table as fast as he can and hoping to overpower Chad before he gets his shop set up. And Crux just makes that so hard to execute.
Another Hornet Queen is the draw.
Sure, why not?
Here comes the Siege Rhino. The one thing Kastel doesn't have right now is a 7th mana source.
We did get a Caryatid last turn, so if he wants to, he can kill the Fleece Mane Lion and cast Caryatid, which is not a shabby turn.
And he's happy with just leaving that Fleece Mane Lion in play. Doesn't fear it too much as Boswell will take a draw step. It's a copy of Hero's Downfall.
These Nissas that served Boswell so well through the Swiss rounds. Not really so hot right now.
Yeah. Hero's Downfall took care of the Rhino. Fleeceman was able to get in. But much like game number 1, a Hornet Queen has shown up, and I think it's going to do Boswell in.
And I believe Chad's draw this turn was also Whip of Erebos. So
yeah, well, there you go.
With Rhino in the graveyard, another Hornet Queen in hand, just such an overpowering position to be in.
Valor Stance the draw here for Boswell. No targets. 2 Nissas gumming things up. A card that can be pretty good in this matchup situation depending, but not in the current situation we're in. Fleece Mane Lion may be feeling a little frisky.
Can't take it with you, so
that's fair. Boswell says, I'll pick a different spot for this lion. There's a copy of Llanowar Waste. Here is a Whip of Erebos. It'll be a whip activation to get back the Rhino. The trigger here will bring Boswell down to 5. Everyone will come into the red zone, and Boswell will extend the hand. Chad Kastel is going to win this match here over Andrew Boswell, 2-0. Abzan Whip will take care of Abzan Aggro in rather dominant fashion.